In the previous video, we provided a brief overview of the dinosaur story. Although many dinosaurs didn't have the opportunity to make an appearance, we outlined the evolutionary process of dinosaurs. Now, during the era when dinosaurs ruled the Earth, what were our ancestors, the Synapsida animals, up to? Fueled by curiosity, I delved into numerous resources, only to find myself overwhelmed by my inability to distinguish them due to my face blindness. Mesozoic Synapsida all look quite similar, resembling small rodents. Today, we'll delve into the story of these Synapsida during the Mesozoic. Throughout the narration, I'll continue to use dragons to represent the Sauropsida and beasts to represent the Synapsida. So, let's get started. The story still begins with that catastrophe, the Permian-Triassic mass extinction, also known as the Great Dying. This extinction event directly overturned the dominance of the beasts. However, in the aftermath, during the early Triassic on the barren lands, the beasts remained at the top of the food chain on Pangaea. For example, Moschorhynus, which was about the size of a leopard, had sharp canines and the keenest senses of its time. Though it didn't appear formidable, remember, this was in the aftermath of the extinction, where these abilities were enough to make it a dominant force. Additionally, there's Lystrosaurus, equipped with beaks capable of effortlessly slicing through plants and tusks for digging up underground tumors, making them the most abundant herbivores in the early Triassic. However, this couldn't restore the former glory of the beast's reign. Moschorhynus and the entire group of Therocephalia it belonged to persisted for less than 10 million years before extinction, while Lystrosaurus lasted only around 20 million years. As I delved into the reasons for their extinction, I found it was still due to the flaws inherent in beasts. As I mentioned before, the Triassic was the hottest and driest period in Earth's history, and the poor water retention abilities of beasts left them defenseless against the expanding deserts. Moreover, the beasts' primitive amniotic eggs only hatched out almost immobile premature infants. As food became scarce, beasts had to spend more time foraging, leaving their offspring vulnerable to predation by other hunters. Eventually, beasts dwindled down to a small-bodied group, Cynodontia. Although they were no longer the apex predators and had reduced in size, there were advantages to being smaller. Smaller size meant requiring fewer resources, and the offspring needed less time to mature, making it easier to hide them away in burrows. On a side note, I often use an active narrative style to discuss animal evolution, and many friends have pointed out that this may be misleading. Of course, I understand that evolution isn't proactive. I simply use this approach to make the story more engaging. In reality, evolution can be brutal, with animals that can't adapt to the environment facing death. The survivors are the lucky ones selected by their environment. But telling the story this way can be a bit harsh, don't you think? Moving on with our story, although Cynodontia survived, life remained challenging for them. Early Cynodontia were mostly confined to a small area in the southernmost part of Pangaea, surrounded by seas on 3 sides and a desert on the other. What's more frightening is that dragons had risen, their drought-resistant abilities, allowing them to easily traverse the desert to prey on the last survivors of beasts. If the story had continued this way, the fate of our ancestors, the beasts, would have been extinction, and there would be no us today. But beasts didn't give up. In order to survive, Cynodontia pushed the limits of competitive differentiation. For example, in the area where Cynodontia lived, there was an abundance of a plant called Glossopteris. These plants were tall and out of reach for most animals, and they also had poor taste, so the mainstream herbivores didn't like them. However, Glossopteris was an evolutionary star. Simply put, Glossopteris was a type of seed fern that, unlike spore-bearing plants, could produce nutritious seeds. At that time, hardly any vertebrates fed on seeds, which gave Synapsids an opportunity. At the same time, the emergence of seeds also saved the insects, which were close to collapse, providing Synapsids with even more survival opportunities. To feed on seeds and insects, some Synapsids developed the ability to climb trees, which allowed them to evade most predators. The tough seeds and insects required careful chewing before swallowing, leading to the jaws of beasts becoming more flexible and gradually evolving molars specialized for grinding. At the same time, 3 jawbones gradually decreased in size and eventually entered the inner ear, evolving into the auditory ossicles we have today, resulting in a significant improvement in hearing. Some beasts even extended a small piece of cartilage outside their ear holes to gather sound. Yes, you guessed it, ears appeared. With robust hearing, smell, and whisker touch sensitivity, nocturnal activity became possible, allowing beasts to completely separate from dragons in both space and time, easing their survival crisis. However, beasts didn't stop advancing just because their survival crisis eased. Within the brains of these Synapsids quietly emerged a brand new structure. Remember the name of this structure, the neocortex. This would usher in the third revolution in neural evolution. Everything was ready, just waiting for an opportunity, and that opportunity soon arrived in the form of the prolonged rainy season we often mention, the Carnian pluvial episode, a 2-million-year-long period of continuous rain. Just as we mentioned earlier, beasts had poor water retention abilities and couldn't tolerate arid environments. Faced with this lengthy rainy season, I imagine the expression on the faces of beasts at that time was probably like this. This rainy season made the migration of Synapsids effortless. However, you may have noticed from the previous video that dinosaurs also rose in the southern part of Pangaea, not far from the territory of Synapsids. One can imagine them crossing paths during migration, exchanging a greeting, and then continuing on their respective journeys to find the future of their own kind. If dinosaurs represent the main storyline of evolution during the Mesozoic Era, then beasts are the subplot. Although unable to compete with the formidable dinosaurs at the time, beasts never gave up their efforts. During countless dark nights, beasts evolved a series of traits. For example, the glands on the bodies of beasts were well developed, which was originally a primitive feature, leading to poor water retention in beasts. However, in the late Triassic period, a group of Synapsids underwent specialization in their glands, beginning to secrete some nutrient-rich sweat. This allowed them to avoid risking their lives to bring food from outside. Instead, they only needed to let their offspring lick the sweat. This is the most primitive form of mammalian behavior, and mammaliaforms stepped onto the stage of history. It's worth noting that there is still debate in the academic community about whether mammaliaforms were capable of mammalian behavior. Personally, I tend to believe that at least some beasts exhibited primitive mammalian behavior. According to molecular clock evidence, the common ancestor of humans and platypuses lived in the Triassic period. In fact, mammaliaforms is a somewhat imprecise term because there are many Mesozoic animals that cannot be strictly identified as mammaliaforms. However, For the sake of convenience in our description, I will loosely refer to most of these taxa as mammaliaforms. Possibly due to the care and nurturing of their offspring, mammaliaforms gained robust adaptability. By the late Triassic period, around 220 million years ago, mammaliaforms had spread across Pangaea. For example, Morganucodonta already possessed nearly all the features of modern mammals. It's worth noting that Morganucodonta occupies the basal position within mammaliaforms and may be a paraphyletic group. These emerging mammaliaforms appeared in almost every corner of Pangaea, seemingly thriving. However, like superheroes in Marvel movies, fate dealt them a heavy blow. At the end of the Triassic period, a series of volcanic activities caused wildfires to rage for hundreds of thousands of years worldwide. Seed ferns, essential for the survival of mammaliaforms, suffered, plunging beasts into another millions of years-long trough. Meanwhile, dinosaurs of the same period remained unaffected. Fortunately, in the warm and humid Jurassic period, a new class of plants began to rise, the gymnosperms. They had tastier seeds and could produce nutrient-rich pollen, leading to an explosion in the population of insects, the primary food source for mammaliaforms. Thus, around 150 million years ago, at the end of the Jurassic period, mammaliaforms experienced another period of prosperity. However, some mammaliaforms sought further development. For example, Myopatagium evolved a membrane.
I believe I can fly.
The current biological classification of Myopatagium is uncertain. Some academic views consider it belonging to Harameiida, while others suggest it belongs to more basal mammals. Regardless, mammaliaforms occupied the canopy niche from then on and rapidly diversified into various species. One group, the Eutriconodonta, was unequivocally mammalian, thriving in the canopy niche. Among them, Volaticotherium also evolved a membrane.
I believe I can fly.
Apart from Eutriconodonta, another flourishing group of mammaliaforms in the Jurassic period was the Harameiida, earlier plant-eating mammaliaforms. The subsequent evolutionary direction of mammaliaforms was crucial for the prosperity of mammals today. As I mentioned earlier, beasts' amniotic egg were relatively primitive. The accumulation of urea, a byproduct of embryo metabolism, inside the egg could poison the embryo itself, leading to the premature hatching of young. To alleviate this, beasts began to retain embryos inside the body for as long as possible, allowing the mother's body to absorb the urea produced by the embryos until the last moment before encasing them in eggshells and laying them. For example, modern platypuses essentially give birth to eggs that are almost ready to hatch. This evolutionary path ultimately led to viviparity. In addition, during extended periods of nursing, mammaliaforms' mammary glands gradually separated from sweat glands and evolved a series of structures to facilitate suckling by offspring. In a sense, viviparity and nursing created the greatest profession among terrestrial vertebrates, mother. However, as a byproduct, it also gave rise to a cohort of rather irresponsible fathers. Nonetheless, discussing the sexual dynamics of mammals can be uncomfortable, so let's skip that discussion for today. In summary, at least by 160 million years ago, in the Jurassic period, Juramaia sinensis already possessed viviparity and lactation ability. From these little ones onward, mammals in the general sense gradually evolved from mammaliaforms and ascended to the pinnacle of beasts. Mammaliaforms were able to gradually evolve during the peak of dinosaur dominance, primarily due to geographical factors. Most mammalia forms appeared in the peripheral areas of Pangaea, equivalent to today's northeastern China, which was densely forested and characterized by complex terrain. This forced local dinosaurs to also reduce their body size, inadvertently placing mammalia forms and dinosaurs on a similar scale. Another significant event occurred around 125 million years ago, when plants began to flower. The earliest known flowers emerged in these peripheral regions, marking the debut of angiosperms, or flowering plants, on the global stage. This region of prosperity for mammalia forms also became the earliest area to enter the Cenozoic era. Following the Botanical Revolution, insects experienced a boom, and flowering plants evolved the ability to utilize insect pollination, instantly surpassing all other plants of the time in reproductive efficiency. Within less than 40 million years, angiosperms conquered the globe. Concurrently, small insect-eating animals also experienced a surge, known as the Cretaceous Terrestrial Revolution. Seizing this opportunity, mammals completed their body evolution, preparing to address their final shortcomings. Despite already having viviparity by this time, mammals were still giving birth to premature offspring instead of fully developed ones. This was not yet perfect. Consequently, two groups of mammals attempted to solve this issue. One representative of these mammals is Cynodelphes. Their offspring would suckle on the mother's teats for an extended period until developing into a normal baby outside the body. Their descendants even evolved a pouch, allowing the young to grow and develop inside it. This group of mammals later evolved into today's marsupialia. In the same region, there was another mammal known as Eomya. They opted for a different evolutionary path. Eomya fused the embryonic urinary bladder, originally used for waste storage, with the mother's uterus, enabling bidirectional transport of materials between the fetus and the mother. This adaptation further evolved into the placenta, allowing the fetus to develop to maturity inside the body, thus solving the problem of premature birth. From then on, a group of mammals with perfect viviparous abilities emerged, known as Eutheria, which includes humans and the vast majority of mammals today. However, at this time, the world was not far from the catastrophic events of the Mesozoic Era. Dinosaurs still dominated, oblivious to the impending apocalypse, and paid little attention to the tiny Eutheria beneath their feet. Then, 65 million years ago, on a fateful day, a large meteorite ended the reign of the dinosaurs, paving the way for the resurgence of mammals. However, not all dinosaurs were forsaken by fate. The Cretaceous Terrestrial Revolution allowed a once small group of dinosaurs to thrive and continue the evolutionary struggle between dragons and beasts into the Cenozoic Era. Let's save the rest of this story for the next video.